When I started to act, my own mother said I was dead to her and changed the locks on my house. And 2 years ago, when I finally signed the paperwork on my first home, I felt something I'd never quite experienced before. Real pride mixed with the kind of anxiety that doesn't settle until the second mortgage payment clears. I was 36 then, living in Asheville, freelancing full-time as a marketing strategist. And while I'd had a few months that were financially tighter than others, I was earning enough to support myself, stack a solid savings cushion, and occasionally send a few $100s to my family when they needed help, because they always needed help. My parents, Denise and Frank, still lived in the same ranch-style house on the east side of town, just past the last real bus stop. Mom cleaned buildings 3 mornings a week for a janitorial company that paid her just enough to cover her gas and groceries, while Dad rotated between fixing fences, unclogging neighbors' sinks, and building sheds no one actually needed. They weren't broke, but they weren't comfortable either, and with both of them now past 60, there wasn't a reliable stream of income anymore. Only whatever came in on good weeks, when their backs didn't hurt and clients remembered to pay on time. My older sister, Tessa, lived in Fletcher with her husband Rodney and their 9-year-old son, Jace, in a 2-bedroom duplex that always seemed to be on the verge of either foreclosure or structural collapse. Rodney worked erratic hours loading trucks at a warehouse that kept restructuring, which basically meant he was never quite fired, but somehow always scheduled for fewer hours each month. Tessa floated from one seasonal admin job to another, and every time I saw her name pop up on my phone, I knew there was a 50-50 chance she was either just saying hi or asking if I could send over a couple $100 to cover something time-sensitive and vaguely catastrophic. I never made a fuss about it. Whether it was $200 for new brakes or $300 because their rent check bounced again, I never asked for repayment, never kept a ledger. I always figured if I had it to spare, I should. That's what people with money did for their family. And for a while, that arrangement worked. My house, the place I'd sunk nearly everything into, became the one constant in a chaotic life. It was small but efficient, 2 bedrooms upstairs, open-plan kitchen and living room below, with a tiny backyard and a porch just wide enough for a chair and a coffee mug. I spent my days upstairs working with clients, building campaigns, editing ad copy, hosting virtual presentations for clients in cities I'd never even visited, and at night I'd make tea, take long walks through my neighborhood, and feel like, for once, I wasn't just surviving. I was building something that felt permanent. The mortgage was manageable at $1,450 a month. Utilities hovered around $180, and I still had room left to contribute to savings and cover occasional expenses without even breaking a sweat. I'd finally built a life that didn't feel like a Jenga tower swaying with every breeze. And then, like clockwork, it began to wobble. It was a Tuesday morning in mid-March, just after I'd finished my second coffee and started replying to emails, when my phone lit up with Mom's name. That wasn't unusual. What threw me was the moment she spoke, her voice thinner than usual, strained like she'd just finished crying or was working her way toward it. "Mallory, honey," she said, "I need to ask you something important." She didn't ease into it, didn't bother softening the request. "There's been a leak in the roof. It got into the living room. The drywall's stained, the carpet's ruined. We had someone come out to look at it, and they say it'll cost around $12,000 to fix everything. Insurance won't cover it. They're saying it's from years of neglect." 12,000 wasn't like the usual ask for a few hundred here and there. That number landed like a punch. I didn't say anything at first, just stared at the spreadsheet on my screen, the one I'd opened to log my new client contract. "That's a lot of money," I said finally, not even bothering to hide the hesitation in my voice. "I know it is," she said quickly, almost cutting me off. "But we've got no savings left, and there's no one else to ask. If we wait too long, it's going to spread and it'll cost even more." The truth was, I had the money, barely. I'd saved 15 grand in an account I hadn't touched, meant for house repairs, emergencies, or possibly a trip I'd been dreaming about since college. I swallowed that dream whole and said, "Okay, I'll transfer it today." Mom didn't pause before thanking me. "You're such a good daughter," she said. "We'll pay you back as soon as we can." I was ready to hang up, a knot already forming in my stomach, when she said, "There's one more thing. While the repairs are being done, your father and I will need a place to stay. It should only be a few weeks, but we can't afford to rent somewhere and still pay for everything else. We were hoping we could stay with you." That stopped me cold. I loved them. I did, but I also loved my space, my silence, the routine I'd built around peace and boundaries. "Mom, I don't know." I started, already imagining the clatter of pans in my kitchen, the nonstop TV, the questions about my job, my dating life, my daily schedule. "We don't have anywhere else to go, Mallory," she said, voice quieter but no less firm. "Just for a few weeks, until it's all done. Please." I agreed before I fully processed it, and that night, I stripped the sheets in the guest room, moved my treadmill and weights into the basement, and cleared off the dresser. It would be temporary. That's what I told myself. 3 weeks at the most. The following Tuesday, I watched from my window as Dad pulled into my driveway with his battered red truck, a tarp covering a pile of boxes, coolers, and what appeared to be every piece of my mother's ceramic chicken collection. I helped them carry their stuff inside suitcases, boxes, framed photos, even a crock pot and a dusty oscillating fan from the 70s. Mom immediately started arranging her figurines around the guest bedroom like she was moving in for good. "We'll try to stay out of your hair," she said brightly, while already asking if I had any lemon-scented dish soap. When I asked how long the repairs would actually take, Dad said, "The guy said 3, maybe 4 weeks. Shouldn't be long." I nodded, went back upstairs to work, and told myself to be patient. They were my parents, and they needed help. The first week passed without incident. Mom cooked every night, which was actually a treat compared to my usual thrown-together meals. Dad fixed a loose gate hinge in the backyard and even trimmed the bushes that had started swallowing my porch steps. They left each morning around 9 to check on progress, came back around 5, and mostly kept to themselves. But by week 2, things started shifting. Mom reorganized the kitchen cabinets without asking, moved the coffee mugs to a different shelf, threw out my favorite chip bowl. Dad left his newspaper and crossword puzzles spread across the dining table every morning like he was trying to anchor himself to my space. I started working longer hours just to stay in my office and avoid the noise. When I asked if the contractor had given any updates, Mom waved her hand and said, "These things always take longer than expected." I didn't press. Not yet. 2 more weeks passed, and I told myself to breathe through the chaos. I'd gotten used to discomfort in life before. This wasn't permanent. Then, one Thursday evening, Mom mentioned she'd invited Tessa and her family over for dinner. "I hope that's okay," she said. "I wanted to cook a nice meal." I nodded, hiding my annoyance. It was my house, after all, and I hadn't been asked. But I let it go. How bad could one dinner be? Turns out that dinner would change everything. Dinner started off tense but civil, though I noticed immediately that Tessa was quieter than usual, only pushing food around her plate while Mom kept bragging about the homemade rolls and how they always come out perfect in someone else's oven. Rodney didn't say much either, except to compliment the pot roast with that same forced cheer he always used when he wanted something. Jace, their 9-year-old, was the only one enjoying himself, loud, messy, running laps around the table with a dinner roll in one hand and a spoon in the other. The first half hour passed like most awkward family dinners, with stories about work, school, the neighborhood, and then Tessa finally cleared her throat in that way I recognized too well. Something was coming, and I could already feel the trap being laid. "So, things have been a little rough lately," she began, her voice deliberately soft, her eyes already glossy like she was trying to summon tears on command. "Rodney's hours got cut again, and I haven't found steady work since that temp job ended in January." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. I'd heard this story before. Hell, I'd lived this story with them for years. But this time was different. This time, there was an ask. "Our landlord's threatening to kick us out," she continued. "We're behind on rent, and he says we've got until the end of the month. We've been trying to figure something out, and then Mom mentioned how you had space here and that. Well, maybe we could stay here just for a little while, just until things get back on track." She was looking directly at me, eyes pleading like she was already picturing which room would be hers. I nearly dropped my fork. "Tessa, I'm already housing Mom and Dad, and I work from home. My office is upstairs, my calls are constant, And this house is not built to hold 6 people at once, especially not long-term. Rodney jumped in before she could respond. But we've seen the upstairs, he said, waving his fork around like it was a courtroom exhibit. There's an extra room. And Jace could sleep on the couch if we need to. I tried not to lose my temper. This isn't about space. It's about boundaries. It's about noise, privacy, work, and the fact that I need my house to stay livable. Because if I can't concentrate, I lose clients. If I lose clients, none of us are going to have anything. Tessa's voice rose before I could finish. So you'd rather let your own nephew end up on the street than share your oversized house for a few weeks? That's not what I said. I replied, clenching my jaw. I never said I wouldn't help. I said you can't live here. She stood up abruptly, grabbing Jace by the wrist. Come on, Rod. Let's go. Clearly, we're not welcome in Mallory's perfect little castle. The front door slammed behind them, and I sat back down at the table, my appetite gone. The silence that followed was heavier than anything I'd felt in that house since I moved in. The next morning, the shift was immediate. Mom barely spoke to me while she made coffee. Dad only nodded when he passed me in the hallway. That afternoon, while I was on a call, I heard them talking loudly in the kitchen, loud enough that it was clearly for my benefit. Some people forget where they come from, Mom said. All this space, and she can't share it. Just sad. These conversations happen daily. They'd talk about Jace, how he deserved stability, how it was shameful for someone so fortunate to be so stingy with her blessings. By Friday, I caved. I called Tessa and offered a compromise, the words burning like acid in my throat. Maybe you guys could stay here, just for a bit, until you find something. 3 days later, their truck rolled up with garbage bags full of clothes and a laundry basket full of Jace's toys. The chaos began immediately. Jace ran through the hallways yelling at full volume, slamming doors, bouncing balls off the walls. I tried to work upstairs while he banged on my office door mid-meeting, asking questions about cartoons and snacks while I whispered harshly, pointing to my headset. Tyler, I'm working, I'd say, trying not to scream. He'd shrug and walk off, only to come back 20 minutes later with another urgent need. I brought it up to Tessa that night, and she just rolled her eyes. He's a kid, Mallory. You don't have any, so maybe you just don't understand what normal looks like. I understand that I can't have him screaming through the house during my business calls, I said. I don't expect silence, but I expect respect. He's not a robot, she snapped. He's doing his best. But he wasn't doing his best. He was doing whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted, and no one was stopping him. Mom picked him up from school every day and then let him roam free like it was his private playground. I was constantly walking through scattered toys, crumbs, muddy footprints. My once peaceful home had turned into a circus tent, and I was the one paying for the privilege. When the next round of utility bills arrived, I almost dropped them. The electricity had jumped from $150 to $330. The water bill nearly doubled. I brought it up at dinner, placing the bills on the table between us. I think it's fair if we split some of these. With 6 people here, the costs are insane. Everyone went quiet, the silence broken only by the sound of Tessa scraping her fork against her plate. We're guests, Mallory, she said finally, her voice cool. Guests don't pay for utilities. Mom nodded beside her. It's not right to nickel and dime your family during a hard time. It's not nickeling and diming, I said, trying to stay calm. This isn't about squeezing anyone. It's about being fair. I'm the only one paying for all of this while also trying to work full-time in the middle of a house that hasn't been quiet in a month. Tessa's eyes welled up, her voice cracking. So now I'm a burden? We asked for help, and now you're trying to guilt us. She got up from the table, Rodney close behind, muttering something about me turning into one of those people who thinks money matters more than blood. I gave up. Completely. I paid the bills, gritted my teeth, and tried to ride it out, hoping this was temporary. But then I asked Mom again about their home repairs. She stirred her tea, avoiding eye contact. They're running behind, she said vaguely. Contractors are unreliable. We're saving up slowly to get everything finished. I frowned. What do you mean saving? I gave you $12,000. That wasn't enough, she said without blinking. And if you want us out sooner, maybe you can send a little more to help move things along. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I was so stunned I didn't even know where to start. And things kept unraveling. Suddenly, on Saturdays, a stream of elderly strangers started arriving, Mom's friends from her church or old card club, or who knows where. We used to host people at our house, she explained. Since it's under renovation, your place is perfect. They'd fill the living room, the kitchen, and even the porch, helping themselves to snacks, soda, whatever I had in the fridge. Some weekends there were 8 people, sometimes 12. They treated my house like a community center. And always, by nightfall, Mom would corner me with the same request. Could you help clean up after everyone leaves, dear? Your father's back hurts and Jessica's exhausted from chasing Jace around all day. So I'd spend my Sunday mornings cleaning wine glasses and scrubbing plates, throwing away napkins, and wiping down counters I hadn't touched. It never stopped. And when I brought up the question again about the supposed repairs, Mom would always wave me off. Soon, she said. Very soon. These things take time. Tessa still wasn't working. Rodney's hours were still a mystery. Jay still ran through the halls like he was raised in a barn. And every single day, I asked myself the same question. How the hell did I end up the only responsible adult in a house full of people who didn't seem to care if they wrecked the one stable thing I'd ever built? I knew I couldn't keep going like this. I just didn't know how to make it stop yet. 6 full months. That's how long they had been living in my house under the excuse of temporary. Every room had been rearranged, repurposed, and slowly overtaken by other people's needs, habits, and noise. The guest room had been claimed by my parents. The upstairs office now had a fold-out mattress leaned against the wall in case Jace got tired, and even the kitchen was no longer mine. Tessa had filled the pantry with canned ravioli and family-sized cereal boxes. Pushing aside the grocery routine I'd once had down to a science. My own bedroom had become my only sanctuary, and even that was interrupted at least twice a day by knocks, questions, shouting from downstairs, or the thump of Jace's feet racing past on some chaotic mission that no one ever seemed to stop. Every Sunday, I'd wake up to a new batch of people downstairs, Mom's friends from her choir group. Dad's old co-workers from jobs he no longer worked, random neighbors from who knows where. These weren't polite drop-ins. They were full-scale gatherings with potlucks, laughter, music, and empty wine bottles piling in the kitchen sink. It wasn't just noise, it was the disrespect of it all. My house, my space, and no one seemed to care that I hadn't agreed to any of this. The final straw came on a Saturday morning in late September. I was packing my laptop, already planning to escape the house for the entire day just to avoid the usual swarm of visitors. I passed my mother in the hallway, already dressed in one of her glittery church tops, humming and arranging fruit on a plastic tray like she was hosting a bridal shower. Just make sure there's toilet paper in the guest bathroom, sweetie, she said without looking up. People will be here around noon. Not, is that okay? Not, do you mind? Just a casual command like I was the hotel staff in my own home. I didn't reply. I left and drove around for hours, aimless and seething, stopping only for coffee and to stare at my phone, debating whether to do something I should have done months earlier. Around 4, I made a decision. Instead of heading back into another afternoon of forced small talk and passive-aggressive guilt trips, I drove straight to my parents' house on the east side of town to see these infamous repairs with my own eyes. It took 20 minutes to get there. As I turned onto their street, I expected to see a dumpster in the driveway, ladders leaning against the roof, maybe even a contractor's van out front. But what I saw instead made me slam on the brakes. The front yard was pristine, grass cut, fresh flowers planted along the walkway, wind chimes dangling on the porch. A shiny gray minivan was parked neatly in the driveway, and on the front lawn, a plastic slide and a baby swing had been set up. I parked across the street, heart racing. I stared at the house like I was seeing it for the first time. There was no construction. There were no signs of anything even remotely related to renovation. I marched up to the door and knocked. A woman I didn't recognize opened it, holding a toddler on her hip and looking confused. "Hi," I said, already dreading the answer. "Sorry, but who are you?" "This is my parents' house." Her eyebrows knit together. "Oh, we're renting it. Linda and Frank, right? They said they were going to live with family while we stayed here." I stood there, trying to process it. "Renting?" I repeated. "Yes. We moved in 6 months ago. Signed a 1-year lease and everything. Is something wrong? No. I lied, already stepping back. Sorry. I think I just had the wrong address. I walked to my car with my hands shaking, feeling something heavy click into place inside my chest. There were no renovations. There had never been any renovations. They had taken my $12,000 under false pretenses, rented out their house to strangers, and moved into mine for free, eating my food, using my utilities, and hosting parties like nothing was wrong. When I got home, the house was packed with guests. Mom was laughing with two women near the fireplace. Dad was seated in his favorite chair like a king, and Tessa was at the stove making popcorn for Jace and one of his cousins. The sound of clinking glasses and chatter made my skin crawl. I stood in the doorway for a few seconds, taking it in. The people, the stolen space, the casualness of their parasitism, and then I snapped. Everyone needs to leave, I said loudly, enough to cut through the noise. Every voice in the room died at once. Mom turned toward me, smiling like I'd just told a joke. You're back early, honey. Come get some. No, this isn't a request. This party is over. Everyone who doesn't live here needs to leave right now. Dad stood slowly, his expression shifting from confusion to irritation. Mallory, what the hell's gotten into you? I ignored him. Out. Now. Guests exchanged looks and started grabbing their purses, their plates, their jackets. Within 10 minutes, the house was quiet again. Just me, my parents, Tessa, Rodney, and Jace, who was sulking in the corner near his tablet. That's when the real yelling started. You embarrassed us, Tessa snapped, arms crossed. You humiliated Mom in front of her friends. I turned on them, voice shaking. I just went to your house, I said to Mom and Dad. There's no construction, no roof repairs, no contractors. Just a young couple with a baby who think they're renting it while you live here, rent-free, like squatters who scammed their way in. Mom paled, but she didn't deny it. We needed the rental money, she said, her voice defensive. We're getting older. We need financial security. So you stole from me? I shouted. You lied about damage, took $12,000, and moved into my house like it belonged to you. You have more than enough, Rodney said, shrugging. Look at this place. You've got plenty. That's not the damn point. I screamed. This was my home, my peace. You took it from me, and now you're treating me like I'm the one out of line for wanting it back. That's when Tessa laughed. We've been here 6 months, Mallory. That means we have tenant rights. If you want us out, you'll have to do it the legal way. I stared at her in disbelief. Are you threatening me in my own house? I'm telling you the truth, she said calmly. You can't just evict people on a whim, even family. That night, I locked myself in my bedroom, numb with rage and heartbreak. I didn't come out for dinner. I didn't say another word. I ordered takeout to the back door and spent the evening researching eviction laws, wondering how the hell it had come to this. My own family was holding my house hostage, and I had no idea how to make them leave. I woke up the next morning feeling like someone had replaced my chest with a brick wall. Heavy, unmovable, impossible to breathe around. I hadn't slept much, not with the voices drifting through the vents downstairs. They weren't even whispering. I heard them laughing. Tessa calling me dramatic. Rodney joking about finally getting an upgrade from their shoebox. My parents didn't object to any of it. In fact, I heard Mom mention how maybe they should bring over the rest of their stuff since Mallory has so much extra room anyway. I laid there in silence, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out how to take back what was mine without setting fire to everything. I didn't talk to anyone that day. I got dressed, left the house without saying a word, and spent nearly 3 hours walking through a park on the edge of town where no one knew my name and no one expected anything from me. The air was cool, almost too crisp for early fall, and it cleared my head just enough to accept what I already knew. I couldn't argue them out of my house. They didn't care about reason. They were treating my home like a gift they were entitled to. I had to stop playing nice, stop hoping guilt or confrontation would work. I needed backup. So I did something I'd avoided for years. I called Sarah, one of the few people I stayed close to from college. She was a real estate attorney now, based in Charlotte, and had always been brutally honest in a way I used to find exhausting, but now desperately needed. Tell me everything. she said the moment she picked up. So I did. I explained the scam with the house, the fake renovation, the $12,000 lie, the new tenants, the parties, the threats, the lockout, all of it in one breathless stream. Jesus, Mallory, she said after a stunned pause. They actually changed the locks on you? Yesterday, I told her. They packed my suitcases and left them on the porch like I was some delinquent roommate. When I knocked, Mom told me that maybe I should be the one to leave if I didn't like the energy in the house. Sarah didn't laugh. She didn't make any jokes. That's illegal. They're not tenants. There's no lease. They've obtained residency through deception. I can draft an emergency eviction notice tonight. We'll serve it tomorrow. You won't even have to see them. Relief hit me like a wave. Thank you, I whispered, and for the first time in weeks, my voice cracked. I honestly didn't know what to do. You're doing it now, she said. But you need to understand this isn't going to be pretty. They're going to lose it, especially when they realize the free ride is over. Let them, I said. I'm past caring. The next morning, I met her in her office. She'd already drawn up the notice, legal, airtight, and blunt. It gave them 14 days to vacate the property and included mention of the misused renovation funds, just to remind them how deep they'd dug themselves. Sarah served it herself. She said Mom tried to talk her out of it on the porch, voice all sweetness and confusion, like she couldn't understand why her daughter would do such a cruel thing. Sarah shut that down with one sentence. You lied, you changed locks illegally, and you're being evicted. Apparently, Mom's face twisted into something entirely different after that. I didn't answer my phone for the next 2 days. They all called, of course. First Mom, then Tessa, then Dad, then Rodney, sometimes individually, sometimes in a group. They left voicemails laced with disappointment, guilt, and desperation. You're tearing this family apart, Mom said in one. We took care of you your whole life, and this is how you repay us. In another, Tessa cried so loudly I couldn't understand half her words, but the message was clear. I was the villain now, the ungrateful daughter, the selfish sister, the traitor who ruined everything. I sent one reply, a group text, short and final. You have 2 weeks to get out of my house. If you're not gone, I'll press charges for fraud and lock you out legally. Do not contact me again unless it's to confirm your departure. The messages stopped after that. Dead silence. Not a single text. Not a single missed call. Sarah kept tabs on the house for me. She drove by a few times and updated me every couple of days. They're still there, she said early the next week. But they've started packing. Your dad was loading a folding table into the truck. Might be a sign they're taking this seriously. 2 days before the deadline, she called again. Mallory, she said, they're moving out. I saw a moving truck, and your sister was hauling bags into the car. It's happening. I didn't believe it until I saw it myself. I drove by that evening, heart in my throat, terrified I'd find the lights still on and Jace's toys still in the yard. But the house was quiet, empty, curtains pulled back, no cars in the driveway, no signs of life, just silence. I parked, walked up to the front door, used the spare key hidden beneath the back porch flower pot, and stepped inside. The air smelled stale and faintly like cheap perfume and cigarette smoke. The living room was a mess. Discarded wrappers on the floor, sticky spots on the tile, scuff marks on the walls that hadn't been there before. The kitchen sink was full of crusted dishes. They'd left behind garbage, dust, a broken lamp in the guest room, and nothing else. No apologies. No notes. Just mess. I didn't care. I dropped my bag on the floor, walked through every room slowly, flicking on lights and running my fingers across counters I hadn't touched in months. My house. Finally, I called a locksmith that night and had every single lock replaced. Front door, back door, basement, even the garage. Then I spent the entire weekend deep cleaning like my sanity depended on it. Mom tried reaching out one more time through an email. 3 paragraphs of guilt, ending with a warning that I would regret tearing the family apart over something as small as money and space. I deleted it without finishing. That chapter was over. They were gone. My house was quiet again, and I was never going back. It took weeks before I could sit in my own living room without tensing at every sound. The silence was unfamiliar at first, almost too wide, like I'd grown so used to the constant noise that peace felt like an echo. But it was mine. I could walk barefoot again without stepping on action figures or someone's crumpled laundry. I could cook whatever I wanted without someone hovering behind me asking when dinner would be ready. I worked in complete silence, took my client calls without interruptions, and for the first time in half a year, I wasn't budgeting around inflated utility bills or secretly dreading the arrival of the mail. A few distant relatives, mostly cousins who had heard a twisted version of events from Tessa or Mom, started reaching out. One even had the nerve to suggest that family matters shouldn't be solved through lawyers, and that we should sit down and talk like adults. I blocked their numbers one by one, not out of spite, but for survival. I didn't want to explain myself to people who hadn't been there while my family systematically dismantled my life for their convenience. They weren't offering peace. They were offering guilt in disguise. Sarah later confirmed what I'd suspected. My parents and Tessa were now all crammed into a small two-bedroom apartment on the edge of the city, waiting out the lease on the house they were still collecting rent from. Apparently, that lease had another 6 months left. They were far from destitute. They still had my money. They still had rent checks coming in. They just didn't have me. And that seemed to be the part that bothered them most. I considered pursuing the $12,000, if only for the principal. But every time I opened the file folder with the receipts and screenshots and potential legal options, I felt the tension come flooding back into my body like cold water. I'd already won what mattered: my space, my stability, and my peace. I didn't want to buy another battle with people who would never truly see what they'd done wrong. I wanted them gone, in every sense of the word. I changed my phone number, deleted old voicemails, blocked them on every social platform. Clean slate, clean walls, clean air. I bought a new rug for the hallway where Jace used to kick his soccer ball. I rearranged the furniture the way I liked it before Mom decided to make the space flow better. I restocked the pantry with things I actually ate and donated everything else to a shelter downtown. Slowly, my house started to feel like my own again. Not just a structure, but a place where I didn't have to brace for conflict every time I walked through the front door. The peace wasn't loud or dramatic. It didn't hit me all at once. It settled in the way sunlight does through a clean window, gradually, but completely. I started reading again, cooking again, listening to music without headphones. I stopped checking the driveway out of habit. I stopped expecting the floorboards to creak under someone else's footsteps. It was just me again, and it was enough. Months passed. I didn't hear from them. Occasionally, someone would mention they were still upset or didn't understand why I'd reacted so strongly, but those people didn't get callbacks. I owed no one an explanation. The only people who knew the full truth were Sarah, a couple of close friends, and this anonymous Reddit account. I don't think my family ever fully believed I would follow through. I think they assumed I'd cave eventually, that guilt would win, or shame, or some misguided obligation to people who used love like a crowbar. But I didn't. I stayed firm. And every day I chose silence over manipulation, boundaries over tradition. I got stronger. Do I miss them? Sometimes I miss who I thought they were. I miss the version of Mom who used to leave voice messages about recipes, the dad who would fix anything with a piece of wire and a story from his childhood, the sister who used to braid my hair before school. But those people weren't real. Or maybe they were, once. But they weren't the ones who walked into my home, changed the locks, and told me I should leave if I didn't like being lied to. Some people say family is everything. And maybe for them, it is. Maybe they were lucky enough to grow up with people who loved them without strings, without conditions, without seeing their independence as a threat. But for the rest of us, the ones with relatives who use bloodlines like weapons, I'll say this: peace is worth whatever it costs. I sleep through the night now. I cook for one and enjoy every bite. My house is small, quiet, and a little uneven in places, but it's mine. Every nail, every squeaky board, every scuff on the floor tells a story, not of betrayal, but of survival. And I'll never let anyone take that away from me again. Some scars don't show on your skin. They sit in the air of a room, in the way you flinch at the sound of raised voices, in the way you second-guess your own generosity. But over time, you learn to listen to yourself again. You learn to trust that protecting your space isn't cruelty, it's self-respect. So no, I won't be sending holiday cards. I won't be replying to guilt-laced texts or answering surprise phone calls. I won't pretend like nothing happened to make people feel better about what they did to me. I'm done explaining, done justifying, done bleeding for people who never once brought a bandage. I got my house back. But more than that, I got myself back. And that's a victory no one in my family can undo.